Testimony from Marco Rubio in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee confirmed the alarming fact that hundreds of millions of dollars is still sitting in a Qatari bank account, despite the fact that evidently the United States sold all of the oil for the benefit of the Venezuelan people, as well as the fact is there seems to be no statutory authority allowing the U.S. government to somehow control this money for Venezuela. All of that and more came out in the testimony because of the Democrats asking these very pointed questions. First was Senator Sheehan, who asked him, is it true that these money that was sold apparently for the Venezuelan people, that there is in fact $200 million of it still in a Qatari bank to this day? Take a listen.
Right. So it's been reported that the oil sold for $500 million, that $300 million went to Venezuelan government. What happened to the other $200 million?
It's still sitting in the account, is my understanding at this time.
The account in Qatar?
Well, the account, yes, but that will ultimately be that's a short-term account. Ultimately, it will be a U.S. Treasury blocked account in the United States.
And will it also be audited?
Correct. Well, the audit will be on the expenditures. At the front end, we'll tell them this is what the money can be spent on. Again, I'm not talking about all the other revenues the Venezuelan government may have. We're talking about the revenues from the sanctioned oil. At the front end, we will say this is what the allowable expenses are. And then they will agree to fund, as part of the overall cost, they will pay for and fund an audit system acceptable to us to ensure that that's how the money was spent.
There's so many alarming statements in Marco Rubio's answer. One is the fact that they do not plan on having an audit of how much has actually been received from the sale of the oil. If you notice, he just says that there will be an audit on the expenditures, basically an audit for how the money is going to be spent, not on how much it is received. The fact that it is in a Qatari bank means that there is going to be no accountability and no transparency about how much was even received by the United States in the sale that they coordinated for the Venezuelan people. Never mind the fact that for some reason, only 300 million of it has so far gone to Venezuela. Why have 200 million of it still sitting in a Qatari bank account? And again, this is just from reporting that there is that much. Marco Rubio seeming to concede that there is, in fact, that much. Now, if you take a look at the executive order that Trump put in place that basically is the groundwork for all of this, he issued the executive order on January 9th. It says that he is issuing this executive order in order to safeguard Venezuelan oil revenue for the good of the American people and the Venezuelan people, seemingly to introduce a concept that perhaps the oil could benefit the American people. Now, in this executive order, he put in a block, basically saying creditors have no access to this money. Marco Rubio in his testimony also said, we'll deal with the creditors later. Well, we'll see if they deal with them and how they decide to deal with them. But this executive order basically said creditors have no claim on this oil. And the purpose, they said, for the oil was evidently the order affirms the funds are sovereign property of Venezuela held in U.S. custody for governmental and diplomatic purposes, not subject to private claims. Talk about a broad purpose for the money. As a lawyer who drafted contracts all the time, language is everything. And you here are writing that it is for governmental and diplomatic purposes, which is perhaps one of the most broadly written things I can think of about how you are going to spend hundreds, if not billions of dollars of oil, especially because the executive order says it is good for the American people and not the Venezuelan people. And then you have diplomatic purposes, which I'm guessing you're talking about diplomatic benefit with the United States. So who knows how this money is going to be spent? And because it's held in a Qatari bank, we aren't going to know how this money is spent. And I've been talking about this on MeidasTouch. MeidasTouch has been talking about this quite a bit. Marco Rubio finally sitting down to testify about this. Now, another Senator Schatz from Hawaii, directly asks Marco Rubio, from what legal basis do you have to suddenly sell oil from another country and park it in a bank that's not even in the United States. Take a listen to what Mark Rubio has to say in response.
Again, I want to ask about the oil. Under U.S. law, funds received by the government must be deposited with the Treasury. Earlier, you testified that the funds are being held short-term in Qatar and then will move to a Treasury blocked account. What is the statutory authority for the administration relying on Qatar to hold the funds?
It's not our funds. The funds are in an account that's owned and signed. It's an account that belongs to Venezuela, but it has U.S. sanctions as a blocking mechanism on it. And one of the primary reasons why it was in a third country initially, until we could create the mechanism to move it to a U.S. presence, is twofold. One, we have an issue we're working through on recognition. What is exactly, you have to recognize a government, but we don't recognize this government. We recognize the 2015 National Assembly. So we have to find some creative way legally to meet that standard. The other is frankly creditors. If any of that money touched a U.S. bank, even if it was an account in the name of the Venezuelans, it would immediately be seized upon by a number of creditors who eventually we'll have to take care of. But in the short term, that would impede the ability of the Venezuelan authorities to receive the funds they need to operate.
So do you have this is what I'm trying to get at, right? Either it's American money, in which case it's subject to the Miscellaneous Receipts Act, and there are all kinds of things that attend to that. You're saying it's Venezuela's money, but it does sound like, according to the EO, according to the president's statements, you are in charge of that money. What authority are you relying on to be in charge, almost in a sort of receivership kind of arrangement, of how funds are both received and expended for a foreign country? Like, wouldn't you have to come to Congress to establish that kind of relationship?
Well, no, because the money never enters our hands. We only control the disbursement of the money. We don't control the actual money.
Sure, but
it comes into our bank account.
Do you think that you have somewhere in the statute or the Constitution the authority to control disbursements of a foreign country?
Well, they've agreed to this. And that's the key. They've agreed to this arrangement in which the sanctions that are placed on this oil is what blocks its distribution. So we've agreed to release sanctions and allow the disbursement of the funding as long as they're spending it in a certain way. So I understand it's novel, but it's the best we could come up with in the short term to ensure that they're...
Is there a written agreement that memorializes this?
Yes. I believe there is, and there will have to be one most certainly once we transition that to U.S. accounts.
Secretary, my understanding is the committee doesn't have this agreement.
Well, I can...
If we do or we don't.
Yeah. And you probably wouldn't, because it's a Treasury matter. Treasury's handled it, but I can most certainly talk to Treasury about providing you the information.
Also, you're the National Security Advisor, so you do have a role here in coordinating between the departments. So it's not just like you can punt this to Treasury.
Yeah, I just didn't bring the document with me.
I got it. Okay. I just want you to land it and get it to the committee, because you're being transparent. I think this is novel. I think it's funky. I think it may not even be permissible. But I don't know until I see the document.
Marco Rubio, not only the Secretary of State, but also the National Security Advisor, evidently has a third role, which is overseeing millions, if not billions of dollars of oil that belongs to another country and deciding how to spend it. This, of course, all being funded by the American people. This naval blockade is costing American taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, we also have Congressman Moulton, who was asked by Pablo Reports, the new DC correspondent for MeidasTouch, who's asking great questions to Congress people as they come out of the Capitol, what he thinks about the fact that Trump, the corrupt grifter in chief, the man who somehow is profiting off of trying to build a ballroom, who raised millions of dollars for his inauguration ball. I mean, at every step, Truth Social, every step, he's trying to make money off the presidency. I mean, the New York Times just did an expose finding that he's made $1.4 billion since taking into office. And they made it clear that was only what was obvious, not even this other, purchase of the club in DC by one of his brothers. Well, this is what Congressman Moulton has to say about the fact that this money is being parked in a Qatari bank.
Congressman, what do you make of Trump banking this Venezuelan oil money in Qatar? Are American banks not good enough?
American banks, he's, I think, a little afraid might actually follow the rules. And he's trying to find banks that won't follow the rules so that this most corrupt administration in American history can continue profiting the President of the United States, his family, and friends.
Let's also talk about the fact that this money now is being overseen by Trump, who is been convicted of fraud. Convicted of fraud, not just through his Trump organization for doing things like inflating the price and value of his own home, but convicted by fraud for falsifying documents in order to hide the Stormy Daniels payment because he wanted to win a 2016 election. It is this man that the American people are evidently supposed to all of a sudden trust that the millions of dollars he's putting in a country, in a completely separate country bank, will go to good use. I mean, according to Politico, even when the United States was trying to govern the sale of the Iraqi oil way back when, even with all the oversight they have then, the United Nations, the United States, trying to diligently track the money because there was so much money with the oil sale. They said that there was even then about $8 billion lost that they just could not track. And this was when you were dealing with people, even under Obama, who were trying to do the right thing because there was just so much oil involved. And there were so many people who were trying to take advantage of the situation somewhere downstream. He was saying so difficult to actually stop corruption. In this situation, you don't have nearly the same amount of checks and balances. In fact, you have the complete opposite. You have the man in charge, Trump, convicted fraudster, putting this money in a country who doesn't care how the United States decides to spend it. He didn't put it into a Swiss bank account. He put it into a country who's not going to ask questions. And we find out today in Marco Rubio, for some reason, there's still $200 million sitting in that bank, and they do not plan to audit how much they received from the sales, only how it is spent. For more on this and other topics, be sure to check out the MeidasTouch YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button, follow the Mistrial podcast wherever you do it, and check out our sponsors. So grateful that they do not censor what I have to say.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.